Hello, my name is Catherine Henderson, though most folks call me Kathy. I'm 62 years old, and I'm from a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm here to share a story that completely changed my life, a story about betrayal, lies, and most importantly, how I found the strength to reclaim my dignity after being deceived for years. It all began in 1978, when I was just 16 years old, living with my parents and three brothers in our modest family home. My father worked at the steel mill, and my mother cleaned houses to help make ends meet. Back then, the options for women weren't what they are today. Most girls either got married young or stayed home to care for their aging parents. I met William Bill Henderson when I was 17 at a local high school dance. He was 23 and worked at the automotive plant. He was handsome, I can't deny that, tall, with dark hair and those blue eyes that made you feel like you were the only woman in the world when he looked at you. I fell head over heels in love, the way only a young, naive girl can. Bill would tell me such beautiful things, promising me a future together, a house of our own where our children could grow up happy and get a good education, a better life than what we had. And of course, I believed every word. How could I not, when his eyes seemed so sincere? We got married when I turned 18. It was a simple wedding at the Methodist church in town, with our families and a few close friends. Among the guests was my cousin Rebecca Becky Morgan, the daughter of my Aunt Margaret. Becky was 20 and had always been the beauty of the family, the one with admirers lining up. She was taller than me, with long, wavy blonde hair, and that infectious laugh that everyone loved. I adored her, saw her as an older sister. During the reception, I distinctly remember Becky approaching Bill and saying, "Take good care of my little cousin. You hear? She's a treasure." And he responded with that smile of his that always melted my heart. "Of course, I'll treat her like a queen." Those words stayed with me because years later, I would understand the true meaning behind that conversation. But at that moment, I was on cloud nine, overjoyed to be marrying the man of my dreams. The first few years of marriage were good. Bill worked at the plant, and I did some seamstress work from home to help with expenses. We had our first child, Lily, when I was 20, and 2 years later, Jack came along. We lived in a small rental house near downtown. We didn't have much, but we were happy. At least, that's what I thought. Bill was a good father. He played with the children when he came home from work, and, despite being tired, helped with some household chores. My cousin Becky had also gotten married by then, to a man named George Sullivan, who worked for the local government. They lived in a bigger house in a better neighborhood than ours. Becky sometimes came to visit us, bringing toys for the children and giving me clothes she no longer wore. "Cousin," she would say, "when George and I have children, they'll be like siblings to Lily and Jack." I felt fortunate to have such a caring and generous cousin. Little did I know that behind that apparent kindness lurked the worst betrayal I could imagine. In the early 1980s, many men from our town started heading west to California, looking for better paying jobs. The steel industry in Pennsylvania was beginning to decline, and unemployment was rising. Wives would stay behind taking care of the children, waiting for money orders that came from out west. It was normal. It was what many families did to get ahead. Gradually, Bill started talking about the subject. "Kathy," he would say, "the plant isn't paying enough. The kids are going to need college funds. We need a house of our own. Out in California, they pay in dollars that are worth a lot more than what I'm making here." At first, I resisted. I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want to stay alone with the children. But he insisted. "It's just for a few years, honey. I'll save enough money and come back. We'll buy a house. Maybe start a small business. The kids will go to good schools." What I never imagined was that each of those promises concealed the biggest lie of my life. Curiously, Becky always supported the idea whenever the topic came up at family gatherings. "Cousin," she would tell me, "Bill is right. It's an opportunity you can't pass up. Besides, you'll see that time flies by." By 1985, when I was 27, Bill had made his decision. He was going to California. He had talked to some acquaintances who had connections out there and could get him construction work in Los Angeles. The automotive plant had started laying off workers. And indeed, money wasn't stretching far enough anymore. Lily was 5 years old and Jack was 3. They needed clothes, shoes, school supplies. It's the only way, Kathy, Bill would tell me every night. Here we'll stay the same our whole lives. Out there in 2 or 3 years, we can change our destiny. I cried silently at night, but finally accepted. After all, I thought, it was temporary. He would go, work hard, send money, and when he had saved enough, he would return to be with us. What I didn't know was that this separation I believed to be temporary was actually the beginning of an elaborate lie that would last for years. The preparations took 3 months. Bill sold some things from the house, his tools, his motorcycle, to gather money for the trip. He explained that he needed to arrive with some cash to support himself during the first few days until he found work. I sold my gold earrings that my parents had given me when I got married, my necklaces, everything of value I had. The day he supposedly left was a Friday, March 13, 1985. I remember it perfectly because it was close to Easter. He left very early before dawn. He hugged me tight, gave me a kiss that tasted like goodbye, and said, "In 6 months, I'll be sending you the first money order. Take good care of the kids. I love you." The children were asleep. He didn't want to wake them up to avoid making them cry. What would unfold over the next 3 years would test everything I believed about love, family, and my own strength. Little did I know that the life I thought I was living was built entirely on lies, and that discovering the truth would force me to become someone I never imagined I could be, someone stronger and more determined than I ever thought possible. Becky came to keep me company that day. She arrived around 10 in the morning with sweet pastries and coffee. "Cousin," she said, "don't be sad. You'll see that everything will turn out fine. Bill is hardworking and responsible. In California, hardworking people progress quickly." She hugged me and consoled me while I cried. She stayed with me all afternoon, played with the children, helped me prepare dinner. I remember that when she left, she said, "Anything you need, whatever it is, just call me. We're family." How ironic to hear those words from the person who was about to betray me in the cruelest way. The first days were the hardest. The house felt empty, silent. The children asked about their father every day. "When is he coming back? Why did he leave?" I explained to them that Daddy had gone to work very far away to buy them toys and a nice house, but that he loved us very much and would come back soon. If only they knew that their father had never left Pittsburgh. But that truth I would discover myself much later. 2 weeks later, I received the first call. Bill called me, supposedly from California, from a phone booth. He told me he had arrived safely, that the journey had been difficult, but that he was already in Los Angeles and had found work in construction. His voice sounded distant, broken up, but it was him. "Honey," he would say, "I miss the kids and you so much. This place is very different, very warm, but the work is good. In 2 months, I'll send you the first money order." And indeed, 2 months later, the first money came. $200, that converted into a substantial amount in those days. It was more money than we had seen together in a long time. I was so excited that I ran to Becky's house to tell her. "Cousin," I shouted, "money arrived from Bill. He's already working." She was very happy, hugged me, congratulated me. "See," she said, "I told you everything would work out." With those $200, I bought new clothes for the children, fixed some leaks in the house, bought food for the whole month, and still had money left to save. I felt so proud of my husband, working hard out there far away to send us money. I wrote him a long letter telling him everything I had done with the money, how the children were doing, how much we missed him. The calls came every 15 days, always from phone booths. Bill told me that he worked many hours, that he lived in a small room with other men from back east, that the food was different, that he missed the meatloaf and apple pie from home. "But it's worth it, honey," he would say, "because you all will have a better life." And I believed every word, every promise, without suspecting that it was all part of an elaborate lie. During those first months, Becky visited me frequently. She helped me with shopping, sometimes stayed to watch the children when I had to run errands. She was great company in those moments of loneliness, or at least that's what I thought. Now I know that each visit was an opportunity to ensure that I continued believing the lie, to keep me deceived while she lived her happy life with my husband. I remember once, about 4 months after Bill supposedly left, Lily asked her, "Aunt Becky, why can't my dad come see us even for just one day?" And Becky replied, "Because, sweetie, when someone is in California, they can't leave easily. If they leave, they might not let them back in. But when he saves a lot of money, he'll come back to stay forever." That answer reassured me. Becky seemed to know a lot about how things worked in California. Her husband George had government connections. Maybe that's why she knew so much. She explained that paperwork took years to arrange, and meanwhile workers from the East Coast couldn't return because they would lose their jobs, and it was very difficult to cross back again. Everything sounded so logical, so reasonable. The money orders arrived every 2 months, always the same amount, $200. Sometimes letters also arrived, written in Bill's handwriting that I knew so well. He told me about his work, the heat, that he had met other people from Pittsburgh who worked in the same construction site. In one letter he said, "Honey, the work here is very tough, but the bosses pay well. I already have saved $500. In a year or two we'll be able to buy that house we always wanted." I kept all the letters in a shoebox. I read them over and over, especially at night when I felt very lonely. The children had gotten used to the routine. Lily had started elementary school, and Jack was in preschool. With the money Bill sent, I could pay for decent schools, buy them nice uniforms, quality school supplies. My life had become a routine of waiting. Get up early, get the children ready for school, clean the house, go to the market, pick up the children, help them with homework, make dinner, put them to bed, and wait. Always waiting. Waiting for the next call, the next letter, the next money order. Sometimes I wondered what Bill's life was like out there. I imagined him in a small room, working under the hot California sun, missing us as much as we missed him. It never occurred to me to doubt him. Why would I? The calls came, the money came, the letters came. Everything seemed normal. However, now when I look back, I realize there were signs that I didn't see or didn't want to see. Like how Becky always seemed to know exactly when the money would arrive. "Cousin," she would say, "don't you think Bill's money order is about to arrive?" And indeed, the next day or 2 days later, it would arrive. Or how sometimes, when we were chatting and I mentioned something that Bill had told me in his letters, Becky already knew about it. "Oh yes," she would say, "those construction jobs are like that," as if she had been there herself. But I was so busy surviving, raising the children alone, managing the money, that I didn't pay attention to those inconsistencies. The first year flew by. By March 1986, Bill had been in California exactly 1 year, or so I thought. The children had grown. Lily already knew how to read very well, and Jack had started asking more elaborate questions about his father. "Mom," he would say, "why can't Dad send us a picture of where he lives?" It was an innocent question, but it made me think. Indeed, in a whole year, we hadn't received a single photograph. When I asked Bill during the next call, he explained that cameras were very expensive in California, and that the money he earned, he had to save to send to us. "Besides," he said, "honey, why do you want pictures of this ugly place? Better when I come back, I'll take you to see beautiful places here in the US." His explanation convinced me. Bill had always been practical with money. By that time, I had established a very clear routine with the money. Every 2 months, exactly $200 would arrive. I had learned to manage that money like an expert. I set aside money for rent, for food, for the children's expenses, for utilities, and I always tried to save something for emergencies. With $200 every 2 months, we could live with dignity. We didn't have extra, but we didn't lack the basics either. Becky continued to be my great support. Whenever I felt very lonely or overwhelmed, She would appear like an angel from heaven. Cousin, she would say, don't get discouraged. You see that Bill is reliable with the money. That means he's doing well. That work is going well for him. Sometimes she brought candy for the children. Other times she helped me with some errand or accompanied me to the market when the bags were too heavy. But I started to notice something curious. Becky always seemed to have extra money. Her husband George worked for the local government. Yes, but it wasn't a very high position. However, she was always well dressed, with new shoes, with nice purses. When I asked her about it, she told me that George had gotten some extra jobs, that they had sold a piece of land they had somewhere. There was always an explanation. I also noticed that her house had started to change. They had put in new carpeting, had changed the living room furniture, had bought a bigger TV. All this during the second year of Bill's absence. When I commented on how nice her house looked, she said, "Oh, cousin, it's just that George got lucky at work. They gave him a promotion, and now he earns more." I was happy for her. I thought she deserved it. I had no idea that those luxuries came from my husband's work, who wasn't in California as I believed, but right here in Pittsburgh, living with my cousin, building a life behind my back. Bill's calls continued to come every 15 days, always from phone booths, always with the same story. Work was good, he missed the family a lot, he was saving money for the return, but I began to notice that his stories were very repetitive. Always the same coworkers, always the same bosses, always the same type of work as if it were a broken record. Once, about a year and a half after he had left, I decided to ask him more specific questions. "Honey," I said, "tell me what a normal day is like for you. What time do you get up? What do you eat for breakfast? What's the place where you work like?" His answers were very vague. "Well, my life is like any job. I get up early, eat whatever cheap food I can buy, go to work, work all day, come back tired." He didn't give me specific details, names of places, nothing concrete. That conversation left me a bit uneasy, but I convinced myself that Bill was so tired that he didn't feel like talking much. Besides, calls from phone booths were expensive. One had to talk quickly, get to the point. It made sense that he would be brief in his answers. Right? By the second year, the children had completely gotten used to their father's absence. Lily, who was now 7 years old, sometimes didn't even mention him. Jack, at 5 years old, sometimes confused Bill's face in photos with other men he saw on the street. That broke my heart, but I understood it was normal. Children live in the present. They can't keep alive the memory of someone they don't see for a long time. I had gained about 20 pounds in those 2 years. The stress, the anxiety, the sedentary routine, all of it had taken its toll. I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized myself. I was a 29-year-old woman who looked 30. I had permanent dark circles under my eyes, dull hair, skin spotted by stress. Becky would tell me, "Cousin, you need to take better care of yourself. When Bill returns, you want him to find you pretty." Now I wonder if those words were genuine concern or if she enjoyed watching me deteriorate while she flourished with the love and money of my husband. What I never would have imagined is that the truth would begin to be revealed in the most unexpected way. Sometimes it's the smallest details that unravel the biggest lies. One day, during the third year of Bill's absence, I went to the bank to cash the money order he had sent me. The teller looked at it carefully and asked me, "Ma'am, does this money come from California?" I told him yes, that my husband worked there. The teller examined it with a magnifying glass and said, "It's just that these bills don't have the marks that money orders sent from out of state typically have. They look like money orders bought here in Pennsylvania." I didn't understand what he meant, but I was left with doubts. That night, I called my sister Linda, who lived in Philadelphia and knew more about the world than I did. I told her what had happened at the bank, and she explained, "Sister, when people send money orders from California, that money passes through many West Coast banks before arriving here. They have marks, stamps, they look different from money orders one buys here in Pennsylvania." Her words made me very nervous. "Linda," I asked her, "do you think Bill isn't in California?" My sister was silent for a moment and then said, "Sister, I don't want to plant doubts in your head, But don't you think it's strange that in 3 years he has never sent a photo, never given you a specific address, never called you from his home? Those questions hit me like buckets of cold water. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until dawn, reviewing all the phone conversations, all the letters, all the details of those 3 years. For the first time, I started asking myself questions I hadn't asked before. Why had Bill never given me an address? Why had he never mentioned specific names of streets, cities, people? Why were all his stories so generic? The next day, I went to look for Becky to talk to her about my doubts, but when I arrived at her house, she told me she couldn't receive me because she had visitors. Through the door, I heard voices, but I couldn't distinguish who it was. Cousin, she told me, better we see each other tomorrow, okay? It was the first time in 3 years that Becky had closed her door to me. That attitude seemed very strange to me. Becky always received me regardless of what she was doing. Her house had always been like my second home, but that day was different. There was something in her voice, in her way of standing at the door, that gave me a very bad feeling. I walked back to my house, very thoughtfully. The doubts that my sister Linda had planted had become real suspicions, and Becky's strange attitude had added fuel to the fire. For the first time in 3 years, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, something wasn't right with Bill's story about California. That night, after the children were asleep, I took out all of Bill's letters and put them on the kitchen table. I read them one by one, carefully, looking for inconsistencies, looking for clues, and it was then that I noticed something I had never noticed before. All the letters were written with the same pen, all of them. In 3 years, Bill had used exactly the same pen to write all his letters. Wasn't that very strange? Also, checking the postmarks, I realized that all the letters had been sent from the same post office in Los Angeles. In 3 years, Bill had not moved from that location even once. He hadn't changed jobs, homes, or cities. Construction workers usually move a lot, go from project to project, but according to the letters, Bill had been in the exact same place for 3 years. Those observations disturbed me greatly. I decided that in the next call I was going to ask him more direct, more specific questions. I was going to ask for details that he couldn't easily make up. And depending on his answers, I was going to make important decisions about my life and that of my children. The next call came 3 days later, as usual. It was a Tuesday night, around 8. I already had my questions prepared. When I heard Bill's voice on the other end of the line, my heart started beating very hard. "Hello, honey," he said. "How are the kids?" "Good, Bill. Good," I replied. "Listen, I have some questions to ask you." "Tell me, sweetheart." "Bill, in 3 years you have never told me exactly what street you live on. Give me your complete address." There was a long silence. Then he said, "Honey, it's just that here the places have very strange names in English. I couldn't pronounce them well for you. But Bill, at least the name of the specific city. You always tell me Los Angeles, but Los Angeles is very big." Another silence. "I'm in Hollywood, honey." "And in what part of Hollywood? What neighborhood? What's your boss's name?" "Kathy, why so many questions? Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, Bill. I just want to know more about your life there. In 3 years, I practically don't know anything specific about what you do. My life there is very boring, Kathy. Work, sleep, work, sleep. There's nothing interesting to tell. Bill, could you send me a photo of yourself? The children want to see what you look like now. I already told you that cameras are very expensive here, honey. But Bill, in 3 years, you haven't been able to save even for a photo. You send $200 every 2 months, but you can't spend $5 on a photo." The silence that followed was very long, so long that I thought the call had been cut off. "Bill, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here." "Kathy, let's talk about something else. How is Lily doing in school?" That conversation left me with a very bad taste in my mouth. Bill's evasions were too obvious. A man who was genuinely working in California could give at least some basic details. But Bill couldn't. or wouldn't give me any specific detail. Something was definitely wrong, and I needed to know what it was. I couldn't continue living in uncertainty. I couldn't continue building my life on doubts and suspicions. I needed the truth, however painful it might be, and if no one was going to give it to me voluntarily, I would have to look for it myself. After talking with Bill, I decided to investigate more thoroughly. I went to the bus station and asked about trips to California. The clerk explained the whole process to me, the documents needed, the crossing points, the travel times. According to him, for 1985, when Bill supposedly left, the trip to California took at least 3 days by bus. And do you know if there are records of the people who travel? I asked him. Ma'am, on the American side, yes, there are records. At the bus companies, they have lists of all the passengers. That information was like a ray of light. If Bill had really gone to California in March 1985, there had to be an official record with the bus company. The next day, I went to the offices of Greyhound Lines in downtown Pittsburgh. It was a place full of people with lots of paperwork, very bureaucratic. I explained to an employee that I needed to verify if my husband had traveled on a specific date. Ma'am, he told me, that information is confidential. It can only be given to the person themselves or with a court order. But it's my husband. Here are our marriage papers. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the rules are the rules. If you want that information, you need to bring your husband or get an order from a judge. It was obvious that Bill wasn't going to come with me, and getting a court order was complicated, but I didn't give up. I asked the employee if there was any other way to verify the information. Well, he said, lowering his voice, if you suspect that your husband never left the state, you can file a report for bigamy or abandonment of the home. In that case, the authority can investigate. Bigamy. That word hit me like a hammer. Was it possible that Bill was married to another woman? Was it possible that the whole California story was a lie to cover up another relationship? I left the bus company offices with my head spinning. The possibilities that opened before me were terrible. If Bill wasn't in California, where was he? Who was he with? Why had he invented the whole story? That night, while the children slept, I sat in the kitchen, thinking about everything I had discovered. The evasions in the calls, the money orders that seemed bought in Pennsylvania, the letters with inconsistencies, Becky's nervous reaction, the impossibility of getting information from the bus company. Everything pointed to Bill deceiving me in a very elaborate way. But if he wasn't in California, where did the money come from that he sent me every 2 months? Someone had to be financing that lie. Someone had to be helping him maintain the charade. And the more I thought about it, the more the image of Becky came to mind. Her nervousness, her rehearsed answers, her increasingly nicer house, her unexplainable extra money. Was it possible that my own cousin was involved in the deception? Was it possible that she knew where Bill really was? Or something worse? Was it possible that she was the reason why Bill had invented the whole California story? I couldn't sleep at all that night. I stayed awake until dawn, pondering all the possibilities, trying to connect loose ends. And by the time the sun rose, I had already made a decision. I was going to hire a private investigator. I was going to get to the bottom of this matter, cost what it may. I had already wasted 3 years of my life believing a lie. I wasn't going to waste another day. The private investigator's name was Mr. Fletcher. He was a man in his 50s, thin, with a mustache, who had his office downtown. It had been very hard for me to find him because at that time, there weren't many private investigators in our city. Finally, a neighbor recommended him to me because he had helped her sister find a husband who had run off with the money from the family business. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Fletcher told me when I explained my situation, what you're telling me is more common than you might think. Many men use the excuse of going to California to cover up another relationship. It's easier to invent that story than to ask the wife for a divorce. His words hurt me, but at the same time made me feel that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions had foundation. How much will the investigation cost? I asked him. It depends on how complicated the case is. but on average, for a basic investigation, we're talking about $2,000. $2,000 was exactly what I had saved from the money orders over 3 years. All my money for emergencies, but I decided that this was the biggest emergency of my life. Mr. Fletcher, what do you need from me to start? I need a recent photo of your husband, all the data you have, full name, date of birth, identification numbers. I also need the names of all the people who might be involved in the deception. I gave him all of Bill's information, and then, with great pain in my heart, I also gave him all of Becky's information. You suspect your cousin? The investigator asked me. I don't want to suspect her, but things don't add up. Her extra money, her nervousness when I ask her about Bill, her insistence that I not investigate. I understand. We're going to investigate both of them. In 2 weeks, I'll have preliminary results. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I continued with my normal routine, taking the children to school, doing housework, going to the market, but inside I was a bundle of nerves. Every time the phone rang, I thought it was Bill, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to talk to him normally, knowing that I was investigating him. Becky came to visit me a couple of times during those 2 weeks. I tried to behave normally, but it was very difficult. I looked at her and wondered if she knew something that I didn't know, if she was complicit in some deception, if she had been seeing me as a fool for 3 years. Cousin, she said to me one of those times, I see you very nervous lately. Are you okay? Yes, Becky, it's just things related to age. You know how we women are. You haven't been thinking silly things about Bill, have you? The way she asked me that question gave me goosebumps. It was as if she knew exactly what I was thinking. No, cousin. What silly things am I going to think? It's just that I see you different, like distrustful. No, Becky, everything is fine. But everything was not fine. Each day that passed, I felt more anxious, more desperate to know the truth. There were moments when I wished the investigator would tell me that everything was okay, that Bill was indeed in California, and that I was being paranoid for no reason. But there were other moments when I already wanted the lie to end, for the truth to come out, however painful it might be. Bill's call came in the second week of the investigation. This time, I tried not to ask him specific questions, because I didn't want him to suspect that I was investigating him. But it was very difficult to maintain a normal conversation. Honey, he said to me, you sound strange. Are you okay? Yes, Bill. I'm just tired. You know, the kids, the house, everything. You're not sick, are you? No, I'm not sick, just tired. Well, my love, I'll send you more money soon, and I have a surprise for you. What surprise? It's a surprise I can't tell you, but you're going to be very happy. Those words gave me a very bad feeling. What kind of surprise could someone who was supposedly in California give me? And why just now when I was investigating him? Finally, the day of the appointment with Mr. Fletcher arrived. It was a Friday afternoon. I left the children with a neighbor and went to his office with my heart in my throat. Mrs. Henderson, he said to me when I sat in front of his desk, I have news for you, and they are not good news. My heart started beating so hard that I thought it was going to jump out of my chest. Tell me, Mr. Fletcher. Your husband Bill never left Pennsylvania. There is no record of him with any bus company. He never crossed to California, although I already suspected it. Hearing those words was like receiving a blow to the stomach. I was left breathless for a moment. Are you sure? Completely sure. I have here the official reports. William Henderson, with the identification number you gave me, does not appear in any departure record between 1980. And where is he then? Mr. Fletcher sighed and looked at me with compassion. Mrs. Henderson, prepare yourself for what I'm going to tell you. Your husband Bill is living in this same city, and he is not alone. Mr. Fletcher's words hit me like lightning. Your husband Bill is living in this same city, and he is not alone. My world faltered at that moment. I felt as if the floor had opened beneath my feet. Who is he living with? I asked with a broken voice. Mr. Fletcher opened a folder and took out several photographs. Mrs. Henderson, your husband is living in a house in the Highland Park neighborhood, a nice house. 2 stories with a garden, and he is living with a woman. He handed me the first photograph. It was Bill. My Bill, coming out of a house I didn't know. He looked the same as always. Maybe a little heavier, but it was him. The second photograph broke my heart in two. Bill embracing a woman at the door of that same house. And the third photograph killed me. It was Bill kissing that woman, and that woman was Becky. My cousin Becky. It can't be, I whispered. It can't be. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Henderson. According to my investigation, your cousin Becky and your husband Bill have been living together for more than 3 years, since he supposedly left for California. I stayed looking at the photographs without being able to speak. In one of them, Bill and Becky were shopping at the market like a normal couple. In another, they were getting into a car. I didn't know. In yet another, they were entering a furniture store together. How is this possible? I murmured. Mrs. Henderson, there's more. Your cousin Becky never officially divorced her husband George, but he left the city about 2 years ago. According to my contacts, George discovered the relationship between his wife and your husband and preferred to leave to avoid problems. The house where Bill and Becky live is in her name. She bought it 2 years ago. Everything was starting to make sense. Becky's extra money, her new house, her nervousness when I asked questions about Bill. She didn't just know where my husband was. She was the reason why my husband had invented the whole California lie. Mr. Fletcher, I asked him, where does the money that Bill sends me every 2 months come from? That was the easiest part to investigate. Bill is working at a furniture factory here in Pittsburgh. He earns well, but he doesn't earn in California dollars. Obviously, the money orders that he sends you every 2 months he buys at money order offices in the city. I have the purchase records. He always buys exactly $200 every 2 months. And the letters that he sends me from California? The letters are sent by him, but he sends them through a contact he has in Los Angeles, a cousin of Becky who lives there. Bill sends the letters and the money to this man, and he forwards them from California so that they appear to come from there. The elaboration of the deception left me speechless. It hadn't been an improvised lie. It had been a planned operation, with accomplices, with strategy, with resources. For 3 years, Bill and Becky had been constructing a false reality for me, while they lived their life together in the same city where I was dying of loneliness. Is there more information? I asked. Yes, Mrs. Henderson, and this is the most painful. According to my investigations, Bill and Becky have been having a relationship since before he supposedly left for California. The neighbors in the neighborhood where they live say that they arrived together 3 years ago and that from the beginning they presented themselves as husband and wife. That information was the last straw. Not only had they deceived me for 3 years, the relationship between them had started before, perhaps during months or even years before Bill invented the California story, perhaps during all the time that Becky came to my house to console me, to support me, to tell me to be patient with Bill. Do they have children? I asked, although I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Not that I know of, Mrs. Henderson, but they live as a married couple. The neighbors know them as Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. I left Mr. Fletcher's office like a zombie. I walked through the streets of Pittsburgh without direction, with the photographs in my purse, with all the information spinning in my head. My husband had not only abandoned me, he had betrayed me with my own cousin, and together they had constructed the cruelest lie that you can imagine. I arrived at my house and sat in the living room, watching my children play. Lily was 8 years old and Jack 6. For 3 years I had told them that their father was working far away to give them a better life. For 3 years I had taught them to miss him, to love him, to wait for him. How was I going to explain to them that it had all been a lie? How was I going to tell them that their father had been here all this time but had preferred to be with another woman? That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything but the betrayal. But after the initial shock, something different began to grow in me. It wasn't just pain. It wasn't just sadness. It was anger. It was indignation. It was a fury that I had never felt in my life. Bill and Becky had played with me for 3 years. They had seen me as a fool. They had planned every detail to keep me deceived. While they enjoyed their life together, Becky had come to my house to console me for the absence of a man who was in her bed. She had played with my children, had eaten at my table, had received my trust while she was betraying me in the lowest possible way. And Bill had stolen 3 years of my life. 3 years in which I could have rebuilt my life, found someone who really loved me, been happy. Instead, I had been waiting like a fool for a ghost. But what hurt me most was thinking about my children. They had grown up without a father because of a lie they had missed, had waited, had loved a man who had abandoned them without explanation, who had preferred to pretend that he had gone out of the country rather than assume his responsibility as a father. That night, watching my children sleep, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay quiet. I wasn't going to allow Bill and Becky to continue enjoying their happy life while I stayed with the pain and humiliation. I was going to make them pay for what they had done to me. I was going to make everyone know who they really were. But it wasn't going to be an impulsive revenge. It was going to be a planned, calculated revenge that would hurt them as much as their betrayal had hurt me. Because if there was something I had learned in those 3 years of solitude, it was to be patient, to plan, to wait for the right moment. During the following days, I pretended that I didn't know anything. I continued with my normal routine. When Becky came to visit me, I received her as always, although inside my stomach turned seeing her pretend concern for me. When Bill called me, I spoke with him normally, although every word of his burned me like acid. "Honey," he said to me in one of those calls, "did the money for this month arrive?" "Yes, Bill, it already arrived. Thank you very much." "How are the children?" "Good, asking for you as always. Give them lots of kisses from me. I'll be able to return soon." "Really? When?" "Maybe by the end of the year, my love. I already have quite a bit of savings." End of the year. It was August 1988. Bill was planning to return from California in December. Surely he had planned a whole story about how he had saved enough money, how he had managed to fix his papers, how he finally could return with his family, and probably thought that I was going to receive him with open arms, grateful that he had returned. But I had other plans for December. Bill and Becky were going to know what it meant to be publicly humiliated. They were going to know what it felt like for all the people to point at them, for all the family to judge them, for all the community to know exactly who they were. I began to plan my revenge step by step. First, I needed more evidence. The investigators' photographs were good, but I wanted more. I wanted irrefutable evidence that nobody could deny. Second, I needed to choose the perfect moment. A moment when the impact would be maximum, when there would be the greatest number of people present. Third, I needed to make sure that my children were protected from all the scandal that was going to break out. I hired Mr. Fletcher again, but this time for him to follow Bill and Becky for several more weeks. I wanted to document their routine, their favorite places, their schedules. "Mr. Fletcher," I told him, "I need you to get me the greatest amount of evidence possible. Photographs, videos if possible, documents, everything that can serve to demonstrate that they have been living together for 3 years." "Are you planning to sue them?" he asked me. "I'm planning something better than a lawsuit, Mr. Fletcher. I'm planning for the whole city to know who they really are." During the following weeks, I studied every detail of Bill and Becky's life. I found out that they had breakfast every morning at a cafe downtown, that they went to the market together every Wednesday, that they ate at Joey's restaurant every Friday. I found out that they had opened a joint bank account, that they had bought a car together, that they had joined a sports club as a married couple. I also found out something very important, that on November 24, for Thanksgiving, they were going to go together to the family dinner at my mother's house. The same event that all my family went to each year, that all the families of the neighborhood went to, the most public and crowded event of the year. That was going to be the perfect moment for my revenge. In the most public place, at the most visible moment, in front of all the people who knew them, in front of all my family, who had been consoling me for 3 years, for the absence of Bill, in front of all of Becky's family, who had been asking about George and pretending not to know why he had left. But for my plan to work perfectly, I needed one more thing. I needed Bill to be there, not as Bill the emigrant who had returned from California, but as Bill the liar who had never left. I needed to discover his deception publicly, not reveal that I had known it for some time. For that, I planned the most important detail of all my revenge. I was going to set a trap for him at the same Thanksgiving dinner, a trap that was going to force him and Becky to be exposed in front of the whole family, without the possibility of denying it, without the possibility of inventing another lie. November was just 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to fine-tune all the details of my plan. 3 weeks to prepare myself emotionally for the most important moment of my life. 3 weeks to ensure that my revenge was perfect, conclusive, and unforgettable, because after 3 years of being the victim, finally the moment had arrived for me to be the one who had control. The 3 weeks that were left until November 24, I used to perfect every detail of my plan. I had decided that my revenge had to be perfect, without loose ends, without the possibility of Bill and Becky being able to deny what had been happening for 3 years. First, I hired a professional photographer. I didn't want to depend only on the private investigator's photographs. I wanted quality material, clear, indisputable. The photographer was named Mr. Davis. He was an older man who had a studio downtown. I explained the situation to him and he agreed to help me. "Ma'am," he told me, "I have seen many cases of infidelity in my 40 years as a photographer, but yours is especially cruel. We're going to make sure you have the best possible evidence." Mr. Davis followed Bill and Becky for 2 complete weeks. He photographed them leaving the house together, having breakfast at the cafe, shopping at the market, entering and leaving the bank, kissing in the park, but most importantly, he photographed them in situations that clearly demonstrated that they were an established couple, not two people who had just met. He also got me something very valuable, a photograph of the facade of the house where they lived, with the visible number, and another photograph of the car that they had registered in the name of both of them. Material evidence, tangible, that nobody could deny. Second, I made a list of all the people who had to be present on the day of my revenge. My mother, my brothers, my aunts, my cousins, Bill's family, his parents, his sisters, Becky's family, my Aunt Margaret, my cousins, all the people who had been asking why George had left the city. To ensure that everyone would be there, I started to visit them one by one, reminding them of the family tradition of meeting at my mother's for Thanksgiving. "How beautiful it's going to be this year," I would tell them. "The whole family has to come. The children are going to have a lot of fun." My sister Linda, who lived in Philadelphia, was coming specially for the holiday. When I talked to her on the phone to confirm that she would come, she said, "Sister, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm very well, Linda. Better than in a long time." "Did something happen with Bill?" "You'll see, sister. On November 24, you'll understand everything." Third, I planned exactly how the whole day was going to develop. Thanksgiving at my mother's always followed the same program. In the morning was the preparation of the food, in the afternoon was the big dinner, and in the evening was the traditional family game time. The greatest concentration of people was always at 5 in the afternoon, right before dinner. According to Mr. Fletcher's investigations, Bill and Becky always arrived at family gatherings around 4:30. They placed themselves near the living room and stayed there until after dessert. It was the perfect moment, maximum concentration of people, maximum visibility, impossibility of escaping discreetly. Fourth, I prepared a speech. Yes, a complete speech of what I was going to say to Bill and Becky in front of all the people. I practiced it in front of the mirror for days, until I knew it by memory. It had to be clear, conclusive, leaving no room for doubts about what had been happening. Fifth, and this was the most important, I arranged all the legal matters. I went to a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. "Counselor," I told him, "I want you to personally deliver the divorce papers to Bill on November 25, one day after my public confrontation. I want to sue Becky for moral damages." "Are you sure, Mrs. Henderson? Once these legal processes start, there's no turning back." "Counselor, after 3 years of lies, the only thing I want is for there to be no turning back." I also went to the bank where Bill and Becky had their joint account. With the information that the investigator had gotten me, and taking advantage of the fact that technically I was still Bill's legal wife, I managed to obtain the account statements for the last 3 years. There it all was, the regular deposits of Bill's salary, the $200 withdrawals every 2 months to send to me, the expenses in restaurants, on clothes, on furniture for their love nest. Sixth, I talked with my children. This was the hardest part of my entire plan. Lily was already 8 years old and could understand some things. Jack was barely 6, but also needed to be prepared for what was going to happen. My loves, I told them one night after dinner, Mom has to tell you something very important about Dad. Is he going to return? Jack asked with shining eyes. No, my love. Dad is not going to return. And the reason is very sad. I explained to them with words they could understand that Dad had been lying, that he had never gone to California, that he had been living with another woman. I didn't tell them that it was Becky because I didn't want to confuse them more. I only told them that we were going to have to face a difficult situation, but that everything was going to be okay because the three of us had each other. Lily cried. Jack didn't completely understand, but he saw that his sister was crying and he also became sad. It was one of the hardest nights of my life, but it was necessary to prepare them. Seventh, and lastly, I prepared myself. I went to the hairdresser. I bought a new dress. I bought new shoes. Not because I wanted to look pretty for Bill, but because I wanted all the people to see me strong, dignified, not as a defeated victim. I wanted that when they remembered me at that moment, they would remember me as a woman who had taken control of her life. The last days before November 24, I continued pretending normality. Becky came to visit me 2 days before Thanksgiving. This time, seeing her pretend concern for me no longer gave me pain. It gave me a strange satisfaction because I knew that in 48 hours her comfortable life was going to crumble. Cousin, she said to me, are you going to Mom's for Thanksgiving? Yes, Becky. I'm going with the children. Are you going? Yes. I'm also going. We can meet there. Of course, cousin, we're going to meet there. The night of November 23, when the children went to sleep, I sat in the living room of my house and reviewed my plan once more. The photographs were ready, the speech was prepared, the lawyers were ready to act the following day. My family was going to be present. Everything was in its place. For the first time in 3 years, I felt powerful. I was no longer the abandoned woman who waited for news from a distant husband. I was no longer the victim of a cruel deception. I was a woman who had discovered the truth and who was ready to do justice. That night I slept better than I had in a long time, because I knew that the next day I was finally going to recover my dignity. November 24 dawned sunny and clear. It was a perfect day for the celebrations and also perfect for my revenge. I got up early, had breakfast with the children, dressed them in their best clothes. Lily wore a blue dress with white lace, very appropriate for Thanksgiving. Jack wore a plaid shirt and corduroy pants. Mom, Lily asked me while I was combing her hair, is something bad going to happen today? No, my love. Something necessary is going to happen today, and after today, everything is going to be better for us. At 3 in the afternoon, I began to get ready. I put on the new dress that I had bought. It was burgundy, elegant but not flashy. I carefully put on makeup, fixed my hair, put on my best earrings. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman who was looking back at me. She was no longer the sad and abandoned Kathy of the last 3 years. She was a determined, strong woman, ready for battle. In my purse, I carried everything that I needed for my revenge: the investigator's photographs, Mr. Davis's photographs, the bank statements, a copy of the records of the bus company that demonstrated that Bill had never left Pennsylvania. It was an arsenal of evidence that nobody could refute. We arrived at my mother's house at 4 in the afternoon. There were already many people, family members with children, aunts and uncles, cousins. The atmosphere was festive, cheerful. People were excited about the big dinner. They didn't know that in less than an hour they were going to witness the biggest scandal that had taken place in that house in many years. Little by little, the members of my family were arriving. My mother was busy in the kitchen with my aunts. My sister Linda arrived from Philadelphia with her husband. My brothers arrived with their wives and children. By 4:30, almost my entire extended family was gathered in the dining room, exactly where I knew Bill and Becky were going to appear. "Kathy," my mother said to me, "you look very pretty today. Any special reason?" "Yes, Mom, today is a very special day for me." My sister Linda looked at me with curiosity. She knew that something was happening, but didn't know what. At 4:45, I saw them arrive. Bill and Becky appeared at the front door, holding hands, dressed like an elegant couple that comes to enjoy Thanksgiving. Bill wore a brown suit with a tie. Becky wore a red dress that I had never seen. They looked happy, relaxed, like a couple that has nothing to hide. My heart started to beat very hard, but not from nerves. It was from excitement. Finally, the moment that I had been waiting for weeks had arrived. I saw them approach the area where they always placed themselves, near the dining room. They were less than 20 feet from where I was with my family. It was perfect. They couldn't escape without all the people there seeing them. I waited until they were completely installed in their place, until they felt comfortable and safe. The official dinner was about to begin. There were more and more people concentrated in that area. It was the perfect moment. I left my children with my sister Linda. "Take care of them," I told her. "In 5 minutes you'll understand why." I walked directly to where Bill and Becky were. As I approached, my determination became stronger. There was no turning back. This had to happen. When I was about 5 feet away from them, Becky saw me first. Her face changed completely. She turned as pale as a sheet. She gave Bill an elbow nudge and whispered something in his ear. Bill turned and saw me walking toward them. His expression was one of total panic. At that moment, I knew that they knew that I knew. Maybe they had noticed that they were being followed. Maybe someone had told them that I had been asking questions, but it was already too late for them. I planted myself in front of the two, less than 6 feet away. The people who were around began to notice that something was happening. The conversations gradually died down. "Hello, Bill," I said to him with a strong and clear voice. "How's the work in California?" Bill remained mute, couldn't say a single word. "Hello, Becky," I said to my cousin. "How is George? Has he returned from his trip yet?" Becky couldn't speak either. The two remained standing there like statues, with decomposed faces. By that time, I had already attracted the attention of many people. My family, who was nearby, began to approach. Other people who knew us also approached, curious to see what was happening. "Aren't you going to greet me?" I said to them, raising my voice so more people could hear. "After 3 years without seeing us, Bill. After 3 years of your hard work in California." Bill finally managed to speak. "Kathy, I can't explain." "Explain what, Bill?" "Explain why for 3 years you told me that you were in California when in reality you were here in Pittsburgh living with my cousin." A murmur spread among the people who were listening. My family approached more with faces of total confusion. "Explain why you sent me $200 every 2 months to maintain the lie while you spent your real salary on this house that you bought together." I took out of my purse the clearest photographs. Bill and Becky leaving their house together, kissing at the door, shopping together at the market. "Or do you prefer to explain why, for 3 years, Becky, you came to my house to console me for the absence of a man who was in your bed?" By that time, a circle of at least 50 people had formed around us. My family was in complete shock. Bill's family, who had also arrived for Thanksgiving, approached upon hearing the scandal. My Aunt Margaret, Becky's mother, made her way through the people. "What's happening here?" she shouted. "What's happening, Aunt Margaret, is that your daughter and my husband have been deceiving me for 3 years. Bill never went to California. He has been living with Becky since he supposedly left." I showed the photographs to my aunt, showed her the bank statements, showed her the bus company records. "Here are the proofs, Aunt. Your daughter didn't just steal my husband. She helped me believe a lie for 3 years while I raised my children alone, thinking that their father was working far away to give us a better life." My Aunt Margaret stayed looking at the photographs with her mouth open. Then she looked at her daughter with an expression that I had never seen: disappointment, anger, shame. "Becky," she shouted at her, "is this true?" Becky finally spoke, but with a trembling voice. "Mom, I, we, it's complicated." "Complicated?" I shouted at her. "Complicated is lying to a cousin who loved you like a sister. Complicated is coming to my house to pretend concern for my husband when you had him in your bed." People began to murmur louder. Some began to take photos with their cameras. The scandal was public, visible, undeniable. Bill tried to approach me. "Kathy, please, let's talk in private." "No!" I shouted at him. 3 years of privacy, 3 years of private lies. Now everything is public. "The children," murmured Bill. "Now you remember the children? After 3 years of abandonment, you remember the children?" I took out the last evidence from my purse, a letter that I had written that very morning, addressed to all the family and all those present. "I want everyone to know," I shouted so that all could hear, "that William Henderson and Rebecca Morgan have been living as a married couple in the Highland Park neighborhood for 3 years, while they made me believe that he was in California working for his family." I handed copies of the letter to my mother, to my Aunt Margaret, to Bill's mother, to several people that I knew in the crowd. "I want you to know that tomorrow I am going to initiate divorce proceedings against Bill and that I am going to sue Becky for moral damages and for complicity in abandonment of home." The circle of people had grown to more than 100 people. Everyone was talking, commenting, judging. Bill and Becky were standing there, completely exposed, with no possibility of denying anything, with no possibility of inventing another lie. "And now," I said to them as a final touch, "I leave you to enjoy your Thanksgiving, but know that your comfortable life and your lie ended today." I turned around and returned to my family, who was waiting for me with faces of total astonishment. My sister Linda hugged me tightly. "Sister," she whispered to me, "you are the bravest woman I know." Bill and Becky remained there for a few more minutes, surrounded by people who looked at them with judgment and scorn. Finally they left, practically running, pursued by murmurings and accusations. My revenge had been perfect, public, conclusive, irreversible. After 3 years of being the victim, I had finally recovered my power and my dignity. The days that followed November 24 were like a whirlwind. The news of the scandal spread throughout the city like wildfire. In a community like Pittsburgh, where everyone knows each other, a story like that becomes the main topic of conversation. For weeks, my phone didn't stop ringing. Family members who wanted to know more details, neighbors who wanted to express their support, acquaintances who wanted to gossip. At first, it was overwhelming, but little by little I realized that the majority of the calls were of genuine support. Women especially identified with me. Many told me their own stories of deception and betrayal. On November 25, just as I had planned, my lawyer personally delivered the divorce papers to Bill. According to what he told me later, Bill received them at the door of the house he shared with Becky, in front of the neighbors who already knew the whole story from the scandal of the day before. "Mr. Henderson," my lawyer told him, "your wife Kathy requests a divorce for abandonment of home and adultery. She is also suing Miss Rebecca Morgan for moral damages. You have 30 days to respond." Bill tried to contact me directly several times during that first week. He called my house insistently, but I didn't answer him a single time. He also came to look for me personally, but I had instructed my neighbors not to open the door to him. Finally, he sent me a letter through my sister Linda. In the letter, Bill tried to explain the inexplicable. He said that he had fallen in love with Becky, that he hadn't known how to tell me, that he had invented the California story so as not to hurt me, that the money that he sent me every 2 months was real, that he had always fulfilled that responsibility, that he had never stopped loving the children. It was a pathetic letter, full of excuses and justifications, but what bothered me most was the ending. "Kathy, we can fix this. We can find a way for all of us to be happy. The children need both of us." All happy? After 3 years of lies, he thought that we could fix this. The letter confirmed to me that Bill continued without understanding the magnitude of what he had done. Becky also tried to contact me. A week after the scandal, she appeared at my house at 7 in the morning, when the children had already gone to school. I saw her through the window and decided to open the door because I wanted to hear what she had to say. She looked horrible. She had deep dark circles under her eyes, disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes. It was obvious that she hadn't slept well in days. "Cousin," she said to me with a broken voice, "please, we need to talk." "We're not cousins," I replied. "A cousin doesn't do what you did to me." "Kathy, please. I know that what I did was very wrong, but you need to understand that it wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened for 3 years? It just happened that you came to my house to console me while you were sleeping with my husband. I love you, Kathy. I have always loved you. That's why I didn't know how to tell you. You loved me? Is that how you show love? Stealing my life and making me believe lies?" Becky began to cry. Everything got out of control. At the beginning, it was just an affair. But then we fell in love for real. Bill didn't know how to ask you for a divorce without hurting you. Without hurting me. Does it seem to you that it hurt me less to make me believe that I was a wife abandoned for economic necessity instead of a wife abandoned for another woman? I couldn't continue talking with her. Her excuses gave me more anger than compassion. I threw her out of my house and told her that the next time she wanted to talk with me, she should do it through lawyers. Meanwhile, the legal procedures advanced rapidly. My lawyer informed me that the case was very solid. "Mrs. Henderson," he said to me, "we have irrefutable evidence of adultery, abandonment of home, and sustained deception for 3 years. The divorce is going to proceed without problems, and probably also the lawsuit for moral damages. But the most important thing for me wasn't the money that I could win in the lawsuit. It was to legally establish the truth of what had happened. I wanted it to remain in official documents that Bill had abandoned his family to live with another woman, and that he had used the California deception to justify his abandonment. The children were the ones who best handled the whole situation. Lily, at her 8 years, understood perfectly what had happened. "Mom," she told me one night, "Dad loved us very little. Your dad loved you, my love, but not enough to stay with us. And Aunt Becky is no longer our family?" "No, my love. Aunt Becky made decisions that removed her from our family." Jack, being younger, only understood that Dad wasn't going to return. But that was okay, because Mom was happier. And it was true. After the initial scandal, I felt more at peace than I had felt in years. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to wait for phone calls. I didn't have to wait for money orders. I didn't have to wait for letters. I didn't have to wait for anything. My life belonged completely to me again. I decided to use the money that I had saved from the money orders to make important changes in my life. First, I moved from the house that I had shared with Bill. It was a house full of false memories, of hopes built on lies. I rented a smaller but nicer house in a different neighborhood where I could start from zero with my children. Second, I enrolled in a computer course. It was 1988, and computers were beginning to arrive in the US. I knew that the future would require new skills and I wanted to be prepared. At 30 years old, it wasn't too late to learn new things. Third, I started a small home catering business. I had always been a good cook, and, with the freedom of not having to wait for an absent husband, I could dedicate time and energy to generating my own income. I started selling homemade pies and casseroles on the weekends, and little by little I built a clientele. The reaction of the community was mostly positive. Women saw me as a heroine who had had the courage to publicly confront her unfaithful husband. Men had more mixed reactions. Some admired me. Others thought that I had been too harsh, but I didn't care what men thought. I had recovered my dignity, and that was the only thing that mattered. My family supported me completely. My mother, after the initial shock, said to me, "My daughter, you did the right thing. Nobody has the right to mock you in that way." My brothers also backed me. Linda said to me, "Sister, What you did is going to inspire many women to not put up with deceptions. Bill's family reacted differently. His parents tried to mediate, to convince me to forgive so that the family wouldn't be destroyed. But I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to return to a man who had lied to me for 3 years, regardless of family pressures. 6 months after the scandal, the divorce was officially approved. Bill didn't oppose it. He knew that he didn't have legal arguments to defend himself. The lawsuit against Becky also proceeded, and although the amount that she paid me wasn't enormous, it was satisfying to know that there were legal consequences for her actions. By the end of 1989, my new life was completely established. My food business was growing. I had finished the computer course and had gotten a part-time job in an office. The children were adapting well to their new reality, and I, for the first time in many years, was completely happy. Not the happiness built on lies that I had had during my marriage, but a real happiness based on my own strength and my own achievements. More than 30 years have passed since that November 24th, 1988, and I can tell you with complete honesty that it was the most important day of my life. Not because it was easy, not because it was pretty, but because it was the day that I decided that nobody else was going to control my story. My children grew up and became wonderful adults. Lily became a doctor, married a good man who respects her and truly loves her, and gave me 3 beautiful grandchildren. Jack became an engineer, also married, and gave me 2 precious granddaughters. The two always tell me that my example taught them that one should never settle for lies, that the truth, however painful it may be, is always better than living in deception. My food business grew so much that I managed to open a small but prosperous restaurant. For 20 years, I was my own boss. I employed several women from the community and retired comfortably at 55 years old. I never remarried, not because I didn't have opportunities, but because I learned to be complete with myself. What happened to Bill and Becky? Their story didn't have the happy ending that they surely expected. 2 years after my public scandal, their relationship began to deteriorate. The problems arrived when Bill lost his job at the furniture factory, in large part because the scandal had damaged his reputation in the city. Becky had to begin to support him economically, and that caused terrible tensions between them. By 1991, Bill had begun to drink a lot and became aggressive with Becky. She, who had left a stable husband for him, found herself with a bitter, unemployed, and violent man. In 1992, Bill had an automobile accident while driving drunk. He survived, but was left with a permanent disability in one leg. Becky took care of him for some years, but by 1995 she couldn't take it anymore. She abandoned him and went to live in Chicago, where nobody knew her story. Bill remained alone, living on a disability pension, in the same house where they had been happy during their first years together. I found out about all of this, not because I was following them, but because in a city like Pittsburgh news travels. And although I'm not going to lie to you saying that I felt sorry for them, I didn't feel satisfaction at their suffering either. By the time their problems arrived, I had already built such a full life that their misfortunes seemed irrelevant to me. What does give me satisfaction is knowing that my story inspired many other women. During all these years, I have received visits from ladies who tell me how my example gave them courage to confront unfaithful husbands, to leave toxic relationships, to take control of their own lives. Some have said to me, "Mrs. Henderson, when my husband deceived me, I remembered what you did, and that gave me strength to not stay quiet." That is the true revenge, not making the people who hurt you suffer. It's converting your pain into power, your humiliation into dignity, your victimization into inspiration for other people who are going through the same thing. Because the reality is that what happened to me happens to many women. Men who abandon their families, the elaborate lies to justify the abandonment, the family betrayals, the complicities that hurt more than the original betrayal. My story is not unique. What was unique was my decision to not stay quiet. During these 30 years, I have learned many important things. I've learned that age is never a limitation to start anew. When I confronted Bill and Becky, I was 30 years old and had 2 small children. Many people thought it was too late to rebuild my life, but it wasn't. at 30, at 40, at 50, at 60 years old. It is always time to make decisions that return our dignity to us. I've learned that the truth, however painful it may be, always liberates more than comfortable lies. For 3 years, I lived in a lie that gave me a certain tranquility. My husband worked far away, but he loved me and would return someday. That lie was easier to live with than the truth. My husband had abandoned me for another woman, but the lie kept me paralyzed, waiting. The truth gave me power to act. I've learned that the most effective revenge is not the one that seeks to destroy the other, but the one that builds yourself up. I could have used my evidence to completely ruin Bill and Becky. I could have continued looking for ways to hurt them for years, but that would have kept me emotionally tied to them. Instead, I used my energy to build a new and better life. I've learned that the support of other women is fundamental in moments of crisis. Without my sister Linda, without my neighbors, without the clients who became friends, I would not have been able to move forward so successfully. Women who support each other are invincible, and I've learned, above all, that it is never too late to be the protagonist of your own life. For 3 years, I was a secondary character in Bill's story, the wife who waited at home while he lived his adventure. But as soon as I decided to take control, I became the protagonist of my own story. That's why I tell all the women who listen to me. It doesn't matter how many years you have. It doesn't matter how long you have been in a situation that hurts you. It doesn't matter how complicated your situation seems. It is never too late to recover your power. It is never too late to demand respect. It is never too late to say, "This is over, and it's over on my terms." If there is something I hope you take away from my story, it's that you too can be the heroines of your own lives. You don't have to wait for someone else to rescue you. You don't have to conform to lies to avoid conflicts. You don't have to sacrifice your dignity to maintain relationships that don't value you. At 62 years old, when I look back, I don't see a woman who was the victim of a cruel deception. I see a woman who had the courage to confront the truth and the wisdom to build something better on the ruins of what was destroyed. And you can do it too at 30, at 40, at 50, at 60 years old and beyond. It is never too late to make the decision that your story is going to be written by you, not by the people who have hurt you. Thank you for listening to me, for accompanying me in this talk so long, for allowing me to share with you the most difficult but also most powerful moment of my life. If my story serves for you to make your own brave decisions, then it was worth telling. Take care of yourselves. Always respect yourselves. And remember, never, but never, is it too late to recover your dignity.